In the late 1800s, Karl Marx wrote a criticism of capitalism, where he explained the relationship between the upper class, which he called the bourgeoisie, and the lower class, which he called the proletariat.
Marx believed that the bourgeoisie exploits the labor power of the proletariat in order to gain more currency. Currency is money and money is power. So because the bourgeoisie controls all the currency, they control the government, the media, the means of production, and most importantly, the proletariat. The proletariat needs currency to survive, so it completely relies on the bourgeoisie to get currency, to buy food, to buy shelter, to buy clothes, etc. The bourgeoisie's main goal is always going to be to gain more currency so that it can stay in power, and so they'll continue to do this regardless of any consequences that result for the proletariat.
Secondly, Marx explained that man, through labor, remakes the world in his own image. He said that the bourgeoisie creates the social and economic conditions which are most beneficial to them, and they do this through hegemony, which is defined as leadership with consent of the led. So basically, the upper class makes their ideas so prevalent that the lower class accepts them without even realizing it. Conversely, that human nature is shaped by the society with which it's surrounded. And this applies to the proletariat. They're completely governed by the society that they live in because the upper class afflicts them with false consciousness. Now, false consciousness means that the bourgeoisie keeps the proletariat believing that the societal ideology that they live in is normal and natural, when in reality it's proliferated by them in order to maintain their social and economic interests. Class struggle is a driving force in history and often leads to a revolution of the proletariat. The social and economic structures set up by the bourgeoisie are set up in such a way that the bourgeoisie can maintain its power. But the bourgeoisie relies on the proletariat for the work, so the proletariat unwittingly hold the true power. Because of the unequal social dynamic, the subordinate class will eventually become conscious of its exploitation, and there will be a conflict between these two classes. This class struggle is a fight between the old and new ideas of the way the society should really be run. According to Marx, this conflict is inevitable. When it occurs, the bourgeoisie will be overthrown because they can no longer maintain the power.
Both Henrik Ibsen's play A Doll's House and the 2014 film The Giver demonstrate the class struggle between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. In both societies, the upper class maintains its position and continues to exploit the proletariat class in order to maintain the illusion of happiness.
In A Doll's House, Nora and her husband Torvald's relationship resembles that of the Marxist view of capitalism. Torvald, the bourgeoisie, exploits Nora's feminine role of the proletariat in their home because he wants to uphold what he perceives as a necessary masculine reputation and the illusion of a happy home. A Doll's House was written in 1879, and at this time, masculinity was defined by having a profitable job and a stable household, which was maintained by a wife. In the play, Torvald calls Nora demoralizing nicknames, such as Little Skylark, Little Girl, and Little Featherhead, likening her to an incompetent little child. He also dictates every aspect of her life, from how she spends her money to her diet. The social imbalance is a result of the economic imbalance between the husband and the wife. So essentially, Torvald is making the decisions in the relationship because he makes the money, so he has the economic and social autonomy. Nora, however, is so formed by the ideologies of her society that she is unaware of her oppression. And as the proletariat, she's so afflicted by false consciousness that she genuinely believes that she and Torvald have a healthy and happy relationship. Torvald is just as much as a product of his time period as Nora is, though, because he doesn't exploit her out of spite, he just exploits her because that's the way society has formed him to believe, and he thinks it's his job. He thinks it's his job to care for his wife and every aspect of her life, to the point where he treats her like a doll in their own house. But even when both Nora and Torvald realize how unhappy they are, Torvald attempts to maintain this illusion of happiness by trying to make Nora stay. But the proletariat revolution is inevitable, so this doesn't last very long. When Nora realizes her oppression and her unhappiness, she attempts to leave. And a proletariat revolt is usually difficult because each member of the proletariat would have to become conscious of their oppression simultaneously. But she's able to do this because she is the only member of the proletariat in her household. When Nora removes herself from Torvald's possession, she destroys his profit. And when she uproots their family, she destroys the illusion of happiness that Torvald has strived so hard to achieve. In the film The Giver, the leaders of Jonas's community become so concerned with maintaining an illusion of perfect happiness that they lose sight of their original goal, which is true happiness, and they begin to take on characteristics similar to the bourgeoisie that Marx criticized in a capitalist society. In their community, the elders make every single decision for the people, down to the clothes they wear and the food they eat. Children are genetically engineered, the jobs are predetermined, they even cover up what death is, but worst of all, they take away people's true emotions. As a result, there's no violence, no unhappiness, and no inequality, but they take this ideal communism to such an extreme that it actually becomes unequal, and it starts to demonstrate this bourgeoisie proletariat power dynamic that Marx criticized capitalist economies of having. The government maintains control through false consciousness. One way they do this is by requiring all the members of the society to take daily injections. These injections hinder creativity and suppress people of all their emotions. These injections, coupled with the fact that their society is incredibly uniform and structured, and that no one in the society has any idea of the way the world was before this oppressive government took over, means that the proletariat can't even imagine a way of life outside of their own. And again, the government promotes these ideals of normalcy in the interest of maintaining peace. The government is so concerned with avoiding conflict that they eliminate people's personalities and individuality, and people don't even know it. They're so shaped by the society that they live in that each member of the proletariat is afraid to differ from the norm, and by this the government effectively keeps them all into the mold that they would like them to be in. Jonas, however, the protagonist, gets the job of being the receiver of memory, and he becomes aware of what the government has been keeping from the people. The giver passes along to Jonas specific memories and the ability to have emotions, and Jonas comes to realize the way the world was before the government took over. Once he's aware of this horrible incongruity, he sees that their society can never be truly equal because the government has taken on such an oppressive role. He wants to embark on his own proletariat revolution. How does he do that? Well, in order to share the memories with the community, Jonas must risk his life in a dramatic escape, but he does. And in doing so, he completely overthrows the bourgeoisie's rule by upending the government.
In both stories, the bourgeoisie exploits the proletariat in order to gain a profit, the illusion of happiness. In A Doll's House, Torvald needs Nora, he needs a wife, in order to have what he believes a man needs to be happy. In The Giver, the elders exploit the ignorance of the community members in order to retain their political power and to maintain their communist political structure. Also, at the beginning of both stories, both the proletariat and the bourgeoisie believe that they're truly happy and completely fulfilled. This is because of false consciousness. Both parties are so completely surrounded by the ideologies of their society that they can't imagine any other way of living. Lastly, a proletariat revolution was easy in both works because there's only one member of the proletariat that really matters. In A Doll's House, Nora is Torvald's only wife, so once she decides to leave him, she doesn't have anyone else to convince to leave with her. She can just walk out. Although in The Giver, Jonah is not the only member of the proletariat, he's the only one that actually has the power to revolt and to change things because he's the receiver of memory. So once he decides to revolt, once again, he doesn't have anyone else to convince to revolt with him, he just revolts. We saw similarities between both works and slavery in colonial America. An idea that the colonial Americans used to justify slavery was the white man's burden. It was the superior, evolved white man's burden to help the poor, unevolved Africans. They decided that Africans couldn't take care of themselves, so it was their job to take care of them. And this idea can be seen in both A Doll's House and The Giver. In A Doll's House, Torvald basically believes that women are stupid just because they're women. You know, Nora doesn't make any money, so she can't make any economic decisions. He basically views Nora as a child who keeps his house. In The Giver, the elder says something along the lines of, if you give people the ability to choose, they always choose wrong. She basically believes that they're not capable of making any decisions for themselves. It's like hiding the knives from a toddler so they don't hurt themselves because they don't know any better. In both works, the bourgeoisie believes that it's superior to the proletariat and that the proletariat can't survive without it, and it uses this idea to justify its actions of oppression.
In analyzing both of these works, we come to see the dynamic between class struggle and the results of inequality and exploitation. We come to see that while capitalism isn't perfect, communism isn't either, and can easily begin to present the same inequalities. And we notice the similarity between this power imbalance and that of slavery in colonial America. In all three dynamics, the ruling class exploits the labor of the underclass and strips them of their humanity. We see how easy it is to make this mistake, and we hope that as humanity we can become more aware of class inequality, and rather than exploiting the proletariat class, begin to value people's humanity over the illusion of happiness.